Hello and welcome to the podcast for the School of Politics and International Affairs at the University of Illinois Springfield. I am your host for this episode. My name is Craig McFarland. I'm an online coordinator in the College of Public Affairs and Education for UIS, and I'm going to continue on with our series of talking to faculty members today. And so I'm excited to get a chance to talk to Dr. Richard Gilman-Opalsky because he is someone that really dives deep into the philosophical issues as a political philosophy content specialist. He really dives into those issues that we're dealing with now contemporarily, but then also the issues of the past as well. And so it's going to be exciting to be able to talk to him about some of his research, what he's done. I know that he's also been a very active voice on campus as well in getting students engaged in their learning. And so I'm excited to talk to him a bit about how he goes about in actually presenting material or teaching to students as well. So I'm excited, like I said, a couple of times now to get into this conversation. So I'm going to go ahead and do that right away. I'm going to go to my conversation with Dr. Richard Gilman-Opalsky. It is so wonderful to get a chance to catch up with Dr. Richard Gilman-Opalsky about what you've been working on here while you've been here at UIS. I think it's interesting because looking back at your biography, you've been here at UIS just as long as I have been as a student before I was a staff member. So I remember you were the new faculty member on campus when I first started back there. So it's great to get a chance to catch up with you today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. And what I like about and have been talking about with interviews with your colleagues is the diversity of expertise that the faculty possess in the School of Politics and International Affairs. And now, from my perspective of your areas of expertise, and you can, of course, let me know how you feel about your areas of expertise as well. But I knew that when looking at classes, you were our political philosopher. You were the person that would really help to understand the ideas, big ideas that politics can produce, ideas about knowledge and virtue and these other like larger concepts. Is that what you would say that your expertise is in?
Yes, absolutely. I studied philosophy for quite some time before I studied political science formally. My undergraduate degree was in philosophy at Hofstra University, and then I went to graduate school for philosophy at the New School for Social Research. And my master's degree was in philosophy. And I switched to political science for the PhD only once it became clear to me that I could do political philosophy in the political science department and keep my attention trained on the things that I was most passionately interested in, which definitely includes big ideas, concepts that we often use without bothering to define or to think about what they mean. And so that is accurate. That's what I bring.
That's fantastic. And what was it about philosophy that drove you not only as an undergrad student, but then through that PhD and then on to now your research work?
Well, the original attraction for me was that was the electricity, the energy, and also the danger, the subversive danger of thinking. Up until I encountered philosophy as an undergraduate student myself, I was unconvinced that the things we do in the university um, could be so exciting. It seemed to me that you go to the university to learn some things that are important, but not particularly urgent or exciting or fascinating. When I encountered philosophy, um, I was excited and I was drawn to the, if I can say it, really the power of ideas, the importance of thinking.
That's fantastic. And you've continued to do a lot of research in this area, but also in terms of connecting with your students, it's interesting because from the moment that you were a faculty member here on campus, there was this sense of you need to take his classes because of the connection that you make with students. What you, I feel like you, I guess I would like to just ask of your thoughts on what the role is, just as you as a faculty member, as a teacher, giving the information that you've now received or you've all brought into your own brain and giving that, disseminating that to your students, just kind of about those thoughts.
Well, the first thing is that I have the good fortune and privilege to be able to teach things that I find extremely important, that I believe are of urgent practical importance for our students, for people who live in this society, for the world. Um, and I'm able to select texts and topics for my classes that I have myself a big appetite for and a passionate interest in. So I bring that sensibility into my classroom because, especially with very difficult material that we read in my classes, the philosophical material, it can be off-putting. And I think that sometimes a person's passionate interests can be infectious. They can be contagious. And so that's part of it. In terms of the importance, more specifically, this is I've been maybe too general in answering you, but more specifically, students who are interested in studying politics, they come into a classroom with a language that they take for granted. Students walk into a classroom and they talk about democracy, and they talk about freedom, they talk about liberty, they talk about equality, they talk about capitalism and communism, they talk about socialism and anarchism and feminism. But um, oftentimes the conversation goes on too long before you realize that we haven't even gotten a basic definition of what is democracy, what is communism, what is capitalism. So, one of the great joys for me in sharing with students is confronting preconceived notions that students have about these words and ideas that they've often taken for granted. They've reproduced them. Sometimes they just circulate in the political conversation. And then if you walk into a classroom and say, what who's for freedom? Everybody would raise their hand. So tell me, what is human freedom? That's a much harder question.
Mhm.
So my classroom is a place for those types of hard questions, but it's also, I think, really important. If we're going to go on talking about democracy, if we're going to go on talking about freedom and communism and capitalism or all these other isms and ideologies, fascism, whatever, we ought to we ought to have an understanding of what those words and ideas mean, where they come from, what is the history of those concepts, how have they been deployed in different locations, you know, and so it improves the quality of the political conversation that I hope my students will go out and have when they leave my class. It also improves the quality of an analysis, that you're able to think critically and analyze what people are saying. Well, wait a minute. Um, that doesn't sound like democracy as I understand it from democratic theory. Or wait a minute, that doesn't sound like liberalism. These people call themselves liberals, but in Gilman-Opalsky's class, we read John Locke and we read John Rawls and we read Immanuel Kant. And how come there is a concept of liberalism that bears almost no resemblance whatsoever? How come the people we call conservatives are nothing like conservative philosophers? And so it's about cognitive dissonance. It's about getting to the origins of our language, so that when we talk to one another about politics and society, we have an understanding of the words that we too often take for granted.
It's fantastic. And especially as we move into whether it's an election year or not, it seems like politics is just never ending in our lives. And as people then enjoy studying politics, I think that you do hear those concepts just thrown out so so much all of the time, whether it be from politicians or from the media or from whatever the case may be, and understanding and really engaging in those terms, what they mean, and then challenging what those terms can mean as well, just seems so important in getting a very well-rounded political science type of education, but then also just to be able to make sure that we can function in a society a little bit better as well.
Yes, absolutely. I agree.
And so I wanted to make sure that we also talk about particular research interests that you have had, and you've put out a number of books, and you now have one that's going to be coming out this summer as well that I wanted to touch on. And I wanted to talk to you a bit about the book that you will be having coming out later on here in July, which is Imaginary Power, Real Horizons, A Defense of Radical Imagination from a Scholar of Social Movements. And to talk about how you decide what areas you're going to focus on when you're trying to put together research that would later then become a published work. Is that something that is led by solely your interest? Is it led by events that might be going on in the world at the time? Is it some kind of combination? How do you come up with the thoughts that you want to then get into your next book or your next research?
Well, the first thing I should say is that my research is each project is very different from the others, yet they all share a common thread. And that is, I am interested in what we could call politics from below. That is to say, all of my work, despite the differences between each book project or article, I'm interested in everyday people. I'm not interested in asking political questions where we focus on the professional political class as the ones whose business it is to do politics. I think politics is everyone's business. And I'm always interested in how people outside of the ruling class, outside of positions of professional politics, do politics. How do everyday people who don't have lots of political power, who don't have money, how do they do politics? Um, what does politics mean for people who are outside of the professional domain of politics? So, what that has meant for me is that I look at what's happening in the world. I'm a philosopher who believes that we don't think above the world, we think with the world, directly from the world, not above the world. But a lot of my ideas, which are theoretical, they're dealing with concepts, they come out of the real movements of real people. So I look a lot at social movements. I look at global uprisings. I look at revolts and rebellions. I look at what people do when they feel marginalized and disempowered, but they want to somehow figure out how they can hold sway without all of the influence that people in the ruling class have. How can they do it? And so there's looking at really existing movements, things that are happening in the world, in the United States, but also elsewhere. That's a part of it. But it also is a lot about history, looking at how social and political change have been brought about from below. How movements of people who've been locked out, whether we're talking about women or people of color, whether we're talking about slave revolts, whether we're talking about sexuality politics, other forms of gender politics today, how much of political history globally has actually been shaped, directed, and redirected by the struggles of real people. Um, in terms of what specific questions I ask in my research, that's a kind of that's a kind of an interesting question for me because I tend to be attracted to things that I'm frightened of. Like there are all these people out in the world who love to watch horror movies, and I kind of like that too.
Uh-huh.
It's sort of there's this, as I mentioned in the beginning, there's a kind of electricity, there's a kind of energy. You can watch something passively, or if it's got some intensity to it, it draws you in. So sometimes for me, there are subjects that I'm afraid of. Like I don't have any knowledge of that. I would like to, but it's so daunting. I'd like to think about it. I don't know if I have anything to say about it, but I think it's important, and yet it's a whole new area I'm afraid to touch. Once I start to think like that, it's already baked in. I mean, it's already been decided. I'm going to go there. So, um, my first couple of books, I wrote about philosophers who I didn't understand. And when I first read them, I couldn't figure out what they were doing. My first book was about Jürgen Habermas. When I read Habermas, I said, I can't figure this out, but I wanted to understand it. I was afraid of his books. My second book was about a French theorist, Guy Debord. And I thought, I can't understand this book, but I think it's really important. And I'd like to be able to know what is going on here. One of my more recent books, The Communism of Love, it's like, I mean, who would have anything to say about love? I mean, it seems like very like it seems terrifying to think about love in a political way. I mean, love as a political power. And yet, as I started to think about it, I was drawn in. There has to be for me some real, genuine interest, as you said, but there also has to be something exciting, um, possibly even frightening.
That's a really remarkable way to go about and to look at that. And I mean, if you think about it, though, there's so much of uh, what politics can impact in these different areas of our lives. You were talking about love, and immediately my thoughts were, especially having been a college student and kind of seeing the evolution of the marriage equality movement. We saw love as a government institution so often and a way to keep people apart and not be able to express that love. And so instantly that's where my brain went when I thought, when you were starting to say politics of love and all of that as well. So I think that it's interesting that you can dive into some of these larger concepts and be able to see what the previous philosophers have said, but then also maybe putting in what your information is or kind of your thoughts on a particular subject as well.
Yes, and I would say too that uh, philosophy for me has to be um, directly connected to real human affairs. It cannot, as I said before, float above. So when you talk about marriage equality, when you talk about how we comport ourselves toward uh, immigrants at the border, and when you talk about how people have differential feelings about casualties in a conflict between Israel and Gaza, love is at work there or its absence.
Mm.
Not only is love a possible political uh, content, but also its absence and the danger of love for two sides in a conflict. So um, yes, for me, it's the big concepts. I begin with philosophy. I look at philosophers who've written about love, who probably once, like me, were afraid to write about it. It was too big. It was too vaporous. And if you're thinking about politics, what's love got to do with that? But they steeled their resolve and they stepped off the precipice with some courage and they wrote about. So I begin with those philosophers, but then for me, it's never just about what someone has written in the 1960s or the 19th century. It's about how do these concepts and philosophical arguments connect to things that are happening right now.
Mm.
You know, so absolutely, when you think about gender and sexuality politics, we have to, if we're going to deal with theories of love, we have to pay attention to those developments. We have to take the philosophy out of its original time period and see if it can help us understand what's happening right now.
I clearly need to come back and take some more of your classes, I think is what needs to happen here. But can you talk to me a bit more about the types of courses that you do teach traditionally here at UIS, or courses that you've developed that you have enjoyed to teach?
Well, I have to say that I actually like all the classes I teach. And one of the nice things for students about taking classes in the School of Politics and International Affairs is that that is generally true across the faculty, that we are teaching classes that we like to teach. There are programs in other places, and there are even some programs at every university, surely including our own, where people have to teach, faculty have to teach courses for very good reasons that they don't have a very strong interest in. That isn't true in the School of Politics and International Affairs. My courses all come out of and very well map over my research interests, my interests in politics. So I teach some core classes like the Introduction to Political Philosophy. I love talking to students about ancient political philosophy, contemporary political philosophy, what's new in political philosophy, and how it's connected to what's old. I have a course that I teach that is for the ECHE program. It's a global awareness course. It's about ideologies, where we move through all the isms, and I get lots of non-majors. We have great discussions, a very interdisciplinary class. Um, I also teach a lot of electives at the 400 level. The electives at the 400 level serve both undergraduate and graduate students. They're all classes that are where the readings are political theory and philosophy, but some of them are thematic. So I have a course um, on postmodern theory. I have a course on Marxist philosophy. I have a course on um, democratization in the public sphere. And then I have a couple of graduate courses, a graduate seminar in political philosophy. I have a graduate course called From Margin to Center, Women in Political Theory. And I'm teaching also the closing seminar for our undergraduate students, where I can help students um, develop their ideas and their final work product for a senior thesis. So I enjoy all of this. It's all quite diverse. It's very different. But if you take a class with me, you will read provocative things. It doesn't get on my syllabus. That's one of the tests. I won't put it on unless it's provocative and challenging and, in my view, fascinating and important. Um, you will read difficult texts, but it will be rewarding, because you will see that you can understand these difficult texts. And not only will you develop an understanding of them, but you'll have something to say about them. You'll develop a point of view. I think students find that extremely rewarding.
Mhm.
That when they open up a text, they say, "There's no chance I can understand it." And then weeks later, not only do they understand it, but they have a criticism, and it's a fair criticism. And it's really wonderful to be a part of that epiphany for our students, that realization that they can do it.
That's fantastic. And you mentioned your other fellow colleagues in the school. So far, I've talked to Dr. Wade and then also Dr. Bolte, and it's so interesting to me, and something that I really think that we have here at UIS in the department and in the school is that we have these varied interests in political science, because there's so many different directions that you can go. We talked to Dr. Bolte about his recent work in political violence and in terrorism, and how that's driving so much of the political sphere right now. We also talked to Dr. Wade about her research into gun violence and going community by community and seeing how state and local governments can have an impact on these things. And then now we're talking to you about these larger concepts of things like love in politics and being able to see what's going on there. And so, and that's just the tip of the iceberg here. I have so many other faculty members to talk to about things like international affairs and legal issues when it comes to politics. And so I really do think that that is something here at a more private liberal arts type of institution like this, that you really get that communication with your faculty member. And so I'm just wondering if you have any potential advice for a student who might be either looking for a program, but less of that, more of maybe a student who knows they want to study political studies or political science, but they're not quite sure about what direction to go because there's so many different avenues. Do you have any advice for that student?
Yes, I would say that when you are you asking specifically about undergraduate or graduate? There's maybe a slightly different answer for each.
Well, maybe we can take up both. Maybe the
Okay.
undergraduate first, and then we could look into more graduate studies as well. But sure, the undergrads would be great.
Okay, so for undergraduate students, I think that my advice would be that to always keep in mind when you're studying politics, what, in your view, are the most pressing matters of your life and times. You know, there are many choices that different students focus on different things. One of the things I see with undergraduate students is that some of them think that um, policy is the most important thing we have to deal with. Policy matters having to do with uh, marriage equality or ecology or education. Other people are drawn to international politics for various reasons. And keep in mind what you find to be the most pressing questions or problems of the day. And as you're taking classes, because there are, as you were saying, Craig, rightly, there are so many different approaches and methodologies in the study of politics. Look for the materials, the classes, the authors, the approaches, the methods that you think can best help us address the problems that you think are the most pressing ones. Um, I mean, I may not agree with students who pick something else than what I would pick, but the point is that political science is a discipline in which there are mixed methods. There are multiple methodologies, mixed methods, multiple methods. There are different emphases and approaches, um, and the search is, in my view, to see what we can take out of the discipline and apply to dealing with the pressing problems of our life and time. So look for those things.
Mhm.
And undergraduate students are um, are in a great position to do that because they're required to take courses in all the subfields of the discipline, and don't expect to be equally excited about everything you study. Um,
Mhm.
Nobody is equally excited about everything that they study. So, but you definitely want to find out what you have, again, the energy for, the appetite for, and that leads to the graduate students. Graduates in our graduate program, there are really three core courses. There's 501, 502, and then the closing course, the closure 590. Um, Everything else is an elective. So what's nice for graduate students, I say, let your passionate interests decide what you take. You have all these electives. You've got to take 501 and 502, and in your last semester, you'll do your closure, whether it's an exam or a thesis, but everything else is an elective. And if you find something that is interesting and you think you might like it, take it. My advice is to take it. Graduate classes, upper division classes, 400 and 500 level classes, they're sometimes taught once every other year.
Mhm.
Don't sleep on something that you have a passionate interest in. You may not be able to take it next semester. Sign up for it and take it, and let your appetite decide um, where you go.
And that's great advice, especially because then you, as you go closer to your closure, you'll start to bring together your committee, which will likely have multiple faculty members from these different avenues. And so you can almost sort of be able to build your interest and work with faculty members on what their research interest might be as well. Just myself personally, Dr. Miller is now retired from the university, but he was American politics, which is something that was interesting to me. I came up as a West Wing kid, and I was very interested in campaigns and elections. And so then I also had Dr. Transu on my committee as well because of the political psychology side of things and public opinion and how that was driving things. And in particular, these third-party groups that were starting to make a more extreme politics, which, not for nothing, but sort of is how everything has gone since I left. So I
Right.
think that it was, it was interesting to be able to find some of those things and be able to study contemporaries and be able to really have those great discussions with faculty too, especially at the graduate level. That's not to say that great discussions don't happen at the undergraduate level, but I loved those seminar classes where you
Yes.
had people that were from all these varieties of backgrounds being able to really discuss these issues that were contemporary to what was going on at the time.
I love what you said. I think it's really important, because it all, for the master's students, it does come together at the end in the closure project. And one of the things that I would really want to impress upon anyone listening to this, which is total agreement with what you said, is the point that scholarly projects as a student, um, insofar as you do them as an undergrad, but certainly as a graduate student, um, they don't have to be like dragging a corpse across the finish line. I mean, there is, again, I mean, there are things that you'll be really excited about, and there are things you will be less exciting about. You'll find them less gripping, less crucial, less exciting. And there are virtues of dispassionate scholarship and objectivity that social scientists use, and we abide by that. But at the same time, your projects, I would say to all students, prospective and present, your projects can be things that you feel close to. Here at UIS, we have a long history and a culture of trying to help students do what they want to do. I mean, sometimes it can't be exactly as you want to do it. It has to be modified in order to be done well. But scholarship, I would say this also as a scholar, one of the great discoveries for me is that it can be joyful. And I would like our program, like the best scholarship, to be joyful, not just grueling pain and suffering of banging your head against a library wall. I mean, there is some of that too, but there's also a lot of joy.
That's wonderful. And the certainly that was the experience I had as a student, and now getting to work with many of you in a staff role. It's great to see how the school functions as a whole and the faculty that have come together in this school. So I guess that I would just ask if you had any final thoughts before we leave here today that you wanted to impart to all of us.
My only final thought is that if you are a student who is attracted to big ideas, if you are a student who likes the subversive and dangerous dimensions of the study of politics, if you are inclined towards philosophy and social movements, come and talk to me. Um, I'm here for that. I'm here for you. And I would like to just invite students who might be interested in anything I've had to say to reach out to continue the conversation.
That is great. Thank you so much for your time today.
My pleasure, Craig.
It was so great to get a chance to speak to him today and to be able to understand more where he's coming from as far as how he directs his own research, and then also the advice that he gives to students as well. I think what a theme that you're hopefully beginning to realize here as you start to listen to some of these other faculty presentations and podcasts and interviews is that we really do have a variety of interests here at UIS in the School of Politics and International Affairs. And so I hope that you're wanting to come and check out those interests and be able to talk political philosophy with Dr. Gilman-Opalsky, or be able to talk more state and local issues with Dr. Wade, or ideas of political violence with Dr. Bolte. Those are the interviews that I've done so far in this series, and I'm excited to continue to share more of those interviews as we start to talk to some of the other faculty members that are also involved in areas of international politics or contemporary politics, as well as American politics as well, and the legal system. So excited to bring all of those to you in the relatively near future. If you would like more information about the School of Politics and International Affairs at UIS, please don't hesitate to reach out directly to me, and I can get you all the information that you need. My email address is dmcfa4@uis.edu. And certainly you can send me an email. It's also going to be in the show notes here as well. And I'll also link the information for the School of Politics and International Affairs in the show notes as well. So it was great to get a chance to talk to Dr. Gilman-Opalsky today. I want to thank him for his time, and thank you for listening to this podcast, whether you're someone who is a prospective student, or maybe just an alumnus wanting to listen back to Dr. Gilman-Opalsky because you loved his classes so much. Thank you so much for listening, and I hope that you enjoy the rest of your day.